Welcome back to Chakde System Design series. I am Chirag Goel. In this episode, we'll be talking about how to crack front-end system design interviews. Yes, we will be talking about things to consider in front-end system design interviews. What are HLDs? What is LLDs? What are the tech stack discussions? What are the other performance discussion? What are the requirement discussion in terms of the functional, non-functional requirements, right? Component architecture. Getting into the what are the things that need to be considered into the implementation detail, right? Not limited to that, we'll be talking about what are the different type of system designs which are asked in different companies. Like Flipkart have productions, Uber has UI architecture, Google have design round, right? Microsoft has system design round. So they are the different things which are basically asked in different interviews. All are around the system design rounds. It's more about few things are heavy on the company specific requirement. We'll be talking about all of them. Not limited to that, we'll be talking about tools that can help you to basically crack the system design interviews. Not limited to that, we'll be also talking about mantras of cracking system design rounds. So are you ready? So let's get started. मोटू भाई का ऑफलाइन बिजनेस तो मस्त चल रहा था। अब मोटू भाई ने देखा कि उनके जो कॉम्पिटिटर्स हैं उनका ऑनलाइन बिजनेस भी होने लगा है। तो मोटू भाई डिसाइडेड कि मैं ऑनलाइन अपना ऐप और वेबसाइट भी बनाऊंगा ताकि मेरे जो कस्टमर्स हैं वो ऑनलाइन बड़े ईज से ऑर्डर कर सकें। तो व्हाट ही डिसाइडेड कि मैं एक खुद की एक टेक टीम सेटअप करूंगा। अब टेक टीम सेटअप करनी है तो मोटू भाई को ये भी पता था मुझे सीनियर डेवलपर चाहिए, जूनियर डेवलपर चाहिए। सीनियर डेवलपर जो हाई लेवल पे इंफ्रा लेवल पे उन्हें चीज़ें पता है, एक सिस्टम कैसे बनता है, कैसे स्केल होता है, उसकी परफॉर्मेंस, सिक्योरिटी, सब चीज़ों के बारे में पता हो। और जूनियर डेवलपर जो सीनियर डेवलपर के अंडर में काम कर सके और एप्लीकेशन डेवलप कर सके, कोड लिख सके, फीचर्स डेवलप कर सके। तो ये चीज़ तो सेट था। तो मोटू भाई ने कहीं तो सुना था कि सिस्टम डिजाइन इज समथिंग विच इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट और जिसके बेसिस पे आप इजीली किसी कैंडिडेट को जज कर सकते हो। कोडिंग स्किल्स रिक्वायर्ड है पर सिस्टम डिजाइन के बेसिस पे आप सीनियर डेवलप को अंडरस्टैंड कर सकते हो कि हाँ ये कितने अच्छे से सिस्टम इसने डिजाइन किया, कितना इसने काम किया हुआ है। सो वॉट ही डिसाइड, ये अपने फ्रेंड के पास जाते हैं। फ्रेंड के पास जाते हैं कि भैया यार सिस्टम डिजाइन के बारे में मैंने सुना तो है, थोड़ा सा बताओ क्या क्या होता है। तो ही वेंट टू हिज फ्रेंड और उन्होंने बताया कि बहुत सारे टाइप के सिस्टम डिजाइन होते हैं इंटरव्यूज। सो लाइक इट देयर इज अ राउंड विच इज कॉल्ड सिस्टम डिजाइन। प्रोडक्ट सेंस होता है, प्रोडक्ट सेंस में बेसिकली आपका प्रोडक्ट टेक, यूएक्स, यूजर एक्सपीरियंस, यूजर इंटरफेस सब कुछ आता है। आर्किटेक्चर में बेसिकली आपका काफ़ी चीज़ें आती हैं जैसे कि आपका फंक्शनल रिक्वायरमेंट है, टेक स्कोपिंग हो गया, कंपोनेंट डिजाइनिंग हो गया, हाई लेवल और लो लेवल डिजाइनिंग वगैरह सब आ जाता है। मशीन कोडिंग में मोस्टली लो लेवल डिजाइनिंग में कुछ चीज़ें डेवलप कराते हैं। अब नाउ मोटू भाई इज कंफ्यूज्ड कि मुझे तो किसी ने सिस्टम डिजाइन के लिए कहा था, अब इसमें प्रोडक्शंस भी आ गया, सिस्टम डिजाइन, यू आर्किटेक्चर, कोडिंग, मशीन कोडिंग राउंड, कंपोनेंट डिजाइन, ये अब ये क्या क्या आ रहा है, राइट? ही गॉट कंफ्यूज्ड। Did you got ever confused? Don't worry. We'll be covering about what are these differentiation and what are these different companies asking about different rounds as a system design rounds. We'll be talking about in detail. But before covering this, let's talk about what are the things which are important in order to understand our system design round. So we'll be covering about things to consider in a front end system design interviews. So couple of things. First important thing is requirement gathering, right? What are the things that you wanted to have in your application in terms of two perspective, like functional requirement, non-functional requirement. Second is the scoping, prioritization. You can't build everything in the first shot, right? तो आपको प्रायोरिटाइज करना पड़ता है, आपका एमवीपी बेसिकली क्या होगा। सो देन यू बेसिकली मेक अ टेक चॉइसेस कि आप कौन सी लाइब्रेरीज, कौन से फ्रेमवर्क्स, कौन सी टेक्नोलॉजीज, कौन सी लैंग्वेजेस यूज करेंगे इन ऑर्डर टू डेवलप द एप्लीकेशन, राइट? देन यू हैव अ कॉम्पोनेंट आर्किटेक्चर कि एक बड़ा सा एक दिखने वाला आर्किटेक्चर, बड़ी सारी रिक्वायरमेंट को ड्रिल डाउन करके अगर देखोगे तो वो कैसा दिखेगा इन टर्म्स ऑफ फ्रंट एंड, राइट? देन इट्स मोर अबाउट कि उनके बीच में जो कम्युनिकेशन है वो कैसे होगा, जो एपीआईज यूज होंगी बैकएंड के साथ वो कैसे कम्युनिकेट करेंगी, कौन से प्रोटोकॉल के साथ कम्युनिकेट करेंगी और उनकी इंप्लीमेंटेशन डिटेल। सो लेट्स डाइव इनटू ईच वन ऑफ देम। Most of the time system design questions are very open ended, right? Like build grocery application like Flipkart, it can be big basket, right? It can be grofers, or it can be applications like you have to build a chatbot, right? Like web.whatsapp.com or WhatsApp, basically similar kind of thing. You can build the Instagram, right? These are mostly the open ended system design questions which are asked. So what you should start with requirement. Yeah, requirement सबसे important होती है, right? So when we say requirement, there are two kind of requirement. Those are very important and we should start with them. First requirement is functional requirement. So let's make it Okay, so first always start with the functional requirement. The second thing that you should is start with non-functional requirement. Okay, Mandoja. So basically you have non-functional requirement. When we say functional requirement, so you have to basically first discuss with your interviewer what sort of area he wanted you to cover. Either that is demand side or supply side, right? So when we say demand side or supply side, it's like, do you want to dive me into the B2B or B2C side of things, which are very very important, right? So always discuss with your interviewer what sort of expectation he's having, right? Second thing, start with high level and dive into the feature level. When we say high level, you always start with a module level thinking, right? And you dive into your feature level thinking. Okay, what it meant by, chalo, let's discuss. When we say module level, right? Any of the application that are built, so that has some critical modules, like you have user management, right? You have other things like help and support, right? You have other things like your payment pricing related stuff, maybe payment gateway, you can say, right? You have your pricing and subscription related stuff, pricing and subscription, right? There are other sort of things which are also very important when you basically talk about any e-commerce application. If you are building like product listing page and sort of thing, maybe taking example, there can be cart page, obviously, where you basically add all the items and finally you see, acha, these are the item I wanted to basically purchase, and finally you click on yes, this is the payment gateway I wanted to go for. And other things, it can be like your accounts management. We have discussed about the functional requirement from the product, from the user perspective, what are the feature and functionality we wanted to deliver to the end user, right? We wanted to have in our application. Now it's time for the non-functional requirement, which is actually going to boost your performance, the out of box features, and you can say the user experiences to the users in your application. Now, couple of things that we wanted to check, either we are building for the mobile or we are building for the desktop, right? Those expectations need to be set. Are we looking for a responsive application or the adaptive? Adaptive is like you wanted to build for a specific resolution or the breakpoint, and responsive is like your application is going to work for all the device sizes, right? Yeah. Then the next thing is what sort of internet speed and what sort of users, where the user will be coming from, right? Which is the internet speed, localization, location, basically location in terms of, in order to like think in terms of the CDN, how fast you can deliver stuff, and obviously so what sort of devices they are going to use, like they are having a tablet or they are going to use on the mobile. Those things are very important, right? In terms of the accessibility, are we also going to support people who have some disability sort of stuff, right? So we have covered all those things in more detail in the previous recording that of the check the system design. You can check it out in the comment, that link is shared. And we also wanted to discuss about like asset optimization. Are we thinking about the how well we are going to deliver our assets in terms of the CSS, JS, images, right? We have to think and discuss, and how we are going to monitor our performance. So when we say monitor our performance, it's more about, are we thinking about like FCP, are we thinking about LCP, are we thinking about TTI, right? In short, we can say, are we thinking about web vitals or not, right? Which are very important. I can keep this together over here. So those things are very important when we discuss about the performance. Are we thinking about the client side rendering or the server side rendering? Those discussions are important. Are we even thinking about authentication and authorization, role based access of your web pages, your features, functionality, thinking about the security, like the cross-site scripting, like SCP, content security policies, so many things. Are we thinking about caching of our resources, caching of the API responses, caching wherever applicable, right? Are we thinking about the offline support or not? Those are important things to basically discuss in the interview. Are we even thinking about logging and monitoring, right? So those things are basically we should discuss in more detail, and let quickly move this up so that we can add couple of more points. So we talked about logging and monitoring, right? So there are other things that need to be discussed, like are we going to support the A/B testing in terms of the, are we going to provide the feature flag so that we can roll out things on the faster basis. We should have the testing like unit testing and end-to-end testing. We thinking about the internationalization, right? Or say suppose localization. Are we even thinking about versioning of your application, right? So is that the requirement? The progressive web app are we going to build, right? Or are we thinking about CI/CD pipeline, right? How our applications are going to be built, how our application is going to be served to the end customers, how it is going to be on the production, right? Are we thinking about some pipelines that we can have in our application to provide the better checks, right? It can be your code quality check, it can be running your automation shoot in terms of your testing. All sort of things can be discussed over here. When we have a huge list in terms of the functional and non-functional requirement, it's time to basically scope it, prioritize it, because in 40 minutes or 45 minutes, in 1 hour, we can't discuss everything that is there on the board, right? So we have to prioritize, and it's time to prioritize this stuff. Once we have list of this requirement, we should not become puspa, right? अपन तो वही बताएगा जो पढ़ के आया है, right? It's good to ask the interviewer like what he's actually looking for, because different people have different expectation and he might be looking for some specific thing to be covered in the interviews, right? So let's not become puspa and say अपन तो वही बताएगा जो पढ़ के आया है, although we all have done this anytime in past, either in college or in our interviews, but let's not do in the system design round, because that will become a create a problem for you. Okay, now talking about the functional requirement, first as we said, we have to like make it clear, either that is demand side or the supply side. Most of the time the interviewer can say I want from the demand side, like I want to see the B2C, like you actually where your customers are basically making a purchase, where they wanted to dive into that. Then in terms of like freezing the modules, say suppose the requirement from the interviewer is I wanted to discuss more on the product listing and the cart page. It can be product listing, and he wanted to talk about the cart page. He want you to dive into that. Now it's time to dive into the features on these basically modules. So try to dive as much as possible, and then like discuss about what are the critical features that you wanted to like freeze on, so that you upcoming time that you have in the interview, you can focus on that. Like features, obviously one thing is you wanted to have a search where you can search the product what you are looking for, the listing of product, which is very important. Then capabilities, like there should be a product detail where user can see the details about the product, right? There can be review section also where you can see the feedback sort of stuff of the product. There can be other critical things, like there should be capability to add items to cart or wish list, right? Whatever you are looking for, you can basically discuss about. Wish list may not be the primary thing, but it's always good to double check with the interviewer. Now the second is the cart list, like you wanted to see all the items that are added into the cart in this one place, where there can be other more capabilities which are very critical, like other capabilities. One is you wanted to see the price breakup, which is important. So what are the taxes applied, what are the discounts that you have received, and all sort of thing. And definitely feature capability to add or remove basically products, which are also important things to have in the cart page. Now you have freezed, you have scoped certain things that you wanted to drill and more discuss about, instead of talking about all sort of module that you have in mind, because now the scope is freezed, you can dive into in more detail. It's time to go into the non-functional requirement, right? So in terms of non-functional requirement, again, you check with your interviewer what sort of expectation he's having. He might say let's go for the desktop application. Let's focus on the responsive design. I want to build it once and it can be used at the multiple resolutions. Wanted to discuss about the accessibility as well. And he's actually looking for the asset optimization and the performance stuff, right? So it's okay, like discuss about those things he wanted to discuss about, as we said, performance as well. What are the other things that our interviewer might be interested in? Maybe he wanted to discuss in terms of the CSR and the SSR, client side rendering and the server side rendering, and the most popular stuff related to the caching, right? How you are going to basically cache your application, or all sort of thing he might be interested in. So with this, we have basically scoped our requirement, and now it's time to dive more deeper into that. So our functional and non-functional requirement is scoping is ready, and we are basically done with that. And we will be diving into the tech choices. First thing is the library and the frameworks basically you are going to use in order to build the application, right? Which is very important to discuss about. It can be like you may be talking about, I wanted to build this feature or the functionality or this application basically on React, right? Because you might have worked upon that. Works for most of the people who have just started their career, a couple of years of experience, and you can just showcase that similar kind of functionality and feature I have worked in my previous organization in the requirement product basically, and those work basically with the React or whatever library that you have worked with. Now for senior people, it doesn't work most of the time. Reason is like you should know what are the options which are present in the market, and what is the best right of choice basically as per the requirement that you have. It shouldn't be like I have worked on this and I want, that's why I wanted to use this particular library or the framework. It should be always combination of multiple things. What is the best suit basically for the requirement, and what is the best fit available in the market, and what are the skill set your team has, right? Which is also a key factor in order to build things on a faster basis and to provide the best possible solution as soon as possible, right? Second thing is your state management. There are so many like options which are available. It can be, if you are using React, it can be context Redux sort of thing, right? There are other sort of state management that you wanted to do. Maybe your database management on the client using the IndexedDB, anything that you wanted to do as per the requirement that you have. Discuss about those choices available. The folder structure is also important. So when we say folder structure, it's more about you want to follow the duck model, like how you wanted to have the different layers in your application, how services you wanted to create, where you want to keep the common pieces, right? All sort of things need to be discussed over here. The packages is important because a couple of people wanted to have the npm packages basically for the different module, or people may wanted to have a mono repo sort of thing, or the micro front end architecture, right? Where, so how you wanted to basically structure your application so that these requirements can be filled, and these can work for the large teams as well, right? So those things can be discussed over here. Dependencies, depending on what sort of requirement you are going to touch upon, you should always discuss these dependencies. Like these dependencies can be like you wanted to build some drag and drop functionality, some mind chart or mind tree sort of thing application that you wanted to have. Maybe you wanted to use the canvas, right? You want some like analytics to happen, so probably you wanted to have the svg sort of stuff, or you wanted to have some streaming or some gaming sort of stuff, WebRTC sort of stuff you wanted to have. You should also discuss about the design system. Either you wanted to build your own design system, or you wanted to latch on the existing design system like material design and design, right? What sort of design system that you wanted to have, so that it works for your, all your applications should have similar look and feel, and obviously it has consistency in terms of user experience. So those things are very important to discuss. Build tool is also key thing that you should discuss, depending on what sort of as requirement, or either you wanted to have a package, or basically you wanted to ship it for different use cases. You should always discuss, like, do you want to have a webpack, you want to have a roll up sort of thing, right? Or you wanted to have parcels basically for your build. It's not built, it's for build tool, right? So basically discuss about those things. Those are very important. So just freeze on the what are the tech choices you wanted to have, you wanted to make, before you move ahead and dive into the more granular level, right? So we'll be getting into the more granular level, but before that, freeze on the tech choices. For UI engineers, for senior people, this tech choice is something which is very critical, and interviewer are very keen and looking into how you are making your choices at the different layers, right? It's time to discuss for the component architecture. When we say component architecture, we have to give dive into the feature, the functionality that our interviewer is looking into, in terms of how we are going to construct and break that problem statement, right? So a couple of things which are very important, like interviewer is saying let's dive into product listing, right? When we say product listing, there are a couple of things that we should always discuss about. First thing is how a component hierarchy is going to look like, right? So when we say component hierarchy, so it's quite similar to like how we wanted to basically have that hierarchy. Maybe something like, let me quickly see how can we get that hierarchy. Okay, something like this. So you have your main component. With that main component you are having different other small component. It can be you are having a search. Along with that search you are having other capabilities in terms of the search, different sort of search you are providing. You have a listing. Basically inside listing you have a product. Each product may be having a catalog or showcase thing that can have multiple other small component, like rating component, your button component, right? Your image component. There are certain different component that you wanted to have. So try to dive into the component hierarchy. We will be diving and we will be seeing this example in the upcoming sessions, where we'll be doing a mock interview on the different HLD and the LLD that are basically asked in the interview. Don't worry about that. It's more about just wanted to give you a high level stuff, how this component hierarchy will look like. So try to use, we will be talking about some tool that is going to help you basically build this hierarchy as well on a very quick and faster way. So this is this with this interviewer wanted to understand how you can break a big problem which is given, and how granular basically you can think in terms of its implementation detail, which is very important. Now second thing is very important is the routing in terms of how you can visualize your application, how you are maintaining your state in terms of the route. What are the things that you are considering while managing and building your application? Like you have a detail page. When you're opening something and some pop-ups basically comes up, are you thinking about persisting those things in a route so that it can be shareable, right? How you are going to share your data between the different routes, those are very important. So data sharing is also very critical thing that you can discuss in the component architecture, where how different component are going to communicate with each other, how different routes are going to access the data at different layer, how you are basically utilizing the cache when you are doing the data sharing. All those stuffs basically can be discussed in the component level architecture. This is something which is very important, and most important part of this is like how you are breaking down your components, or how you are breaking down your big problem into the component level, so that this can be reused at multiple places, and how you are segregating your business logic with your you can say abstract or DOM component altogether. Those kind of thing are basically checked inside this component architecture structure, right? So now once you are done with the component architecture, it's time to dive deeper into the data APIs, protocols, and the internal implementation of the component that you have just discussed about. So let's talk about that. First thing first, protocols. When we talk about protocol, let me quickly make it big. Okay. When we talk about protocol, what are the things that we should talk about? Like either we are going to use the REST, or we are going to basically use the GraphQL endpoint, right? So are we going to use SSE server send event, or we are going to have some RPF sort of thing, right? So these are the different protocols that we have. We will be discussing about these in upcoming sessions. Although some parts we have already covered, but we will be covering. Don't worry about that. So in terms of either we are going to have the JSON sort of response, or we are going to have the protocol buffer. Like people may not be aware of the protocol buffers. Most of the times the developers have worked on the JSON sort of. Don't worry, we will be discussing in more detail. It's more about you should have some idea what are these protocols all about, and like what are these different type of response type as well, right? So with this, basically once we are discussed about finalized what are the protocol that we are going to use as per the requirement, the next thing that need to be discussed is about the implementation detail. When we say implementation detail, it's more about, say suppose as interviewer said, we wanted to discuss about the product list, right? In product list, the key functionalities are related to your pagination, right? You can say pagination or the infinite scroll. When we talk about infinite scroll, it can be using throttling, or it can be using intersection observer. You should talk about those things in more detail, so that it gives a better understanding to the interviewer that you have worked upon it, and you know how things can be handled in such scenarios. You talked about the debouncing when you have the search like capability, obviously the throttling related, so that you understand what are these, and you also discuss about the abort controller, so that you understand, you let them understand, or the interviewer understand, you understand about the cancellations of the API, right? You understand about the inconsistency that can happen because the API response of the previous query may come afterward, and you might show the irrelevant information or the old information to the user, right? So discuss about those things in more detail when we are discussing about the implementation detail, and then chip in into the APIs. Like when we say APIs, it's more about what are the APIs that you need in order to build this application, like product listing, add to cart sort of capabilities you wanted to have. What are the APIs that you need? Like first API which I can think of is you want the get product list, right? You want the list of all the product given some parameter. Those parameter is something that we'll be discussing, but like list down all the APIs that you need. Second is you need the product details, right? So for with respect to a particular product, I wanted to get into the details, and I wanted to see the details of that, right? There should be capability to add product to list, right? So there can be other requirements like remove product from list, right? Which is your cart, or you can say make it cart, which is more better terminology over here, right? So these are, say, suppose the APIs that you are looking for. You can come up with other sort of APIs that you think which are required in order to build the application, the features which you have just closed with the interviewer. Other thing is data modeling, right? This is very important thing that you should discuss in more detail. When we say this data modeling, it's data modeling is all about that you are going to discuss what sort of, like most of the time the UI, the front end, the back end guys sit together in big companies, in good companies basically, in order to decide what sort of contract that you will be having in order to build this feature, the functionality. The first thing first is the URL, what sort of URL that you wanted to have, what sort of methods basically of these URL you will be having, like you have get or post, you have like delete, what sort of method you will be having, right? Update, put basically, and what sort of request and how the request will be sent. Either it is in the query parameter, or you are going to pass in the body, depending on either it is a get API or the post API, right? Which is important. Apart from that, let me quickly move myself. Okay. Apart from that, the things which are important are your response. But before that, I'm just moving couple of things so that it can fit over here. Response are very important, right? We discussed about the request, how you wanted to have it, either in the query or the body, what will be the structure of that. It's time for the response. Most of the time people discuss about how the data will be passed in terms of the actual required data that need to be consumed on the UI, right? But no one basically talks about how the error basically will be circulated. Like you talk about data in terms of this will be the array, or it can be in the object form, right? It can be any form. But discussing about the errors are very important, because you can think of about if you are passing the right set of status code, and you are passing the relevant context from the server to the client, then the localization, the internationalization sort of thing can be taken care of. And obviously certain things you don't want to reveal the exact information, and sometimes you don't want to show the generic information as an error, right? So those things can be handled very well if you think about error, passing the error in your response in a well structured format, and have that contract with your backend team that can be standardized across, right? The status code are very important. Always saying that I will get a like 500 error for any sort of like errors, that doesn't work, right? You should properly utilize like 4 x-axis, 5 x-axis, and even when you have 2 x-axis, let's utilize that in far better way, where I just wanted acknowledgement, I don't want actual data when I am updating something. Use a better status code in terms of the 2 x-axis. So similarly, once this data modeling is done, which is very important thing when you discuss, when you have a proper contract with your backend team, the next important thing is the component. Like interviewer, as your UI engineer, interviewer is also looking into how you basically implement a component, and how generic component you are building, so that there can be multiple consumers, they can utilize this as per their requirement, right? So how you are managing your state, what are the props basically you are thinking in order to expose for that component, so that it can be reused. what sort of event handling that you are thinking about in order to consume, right? So what capabilities you wanted to provide to your consumer so that they can handle, right? So customize, what sort of customization you are going to provide and expose to the your consumers in terms of the theming, in terms of the layouting, right? So can they control the colors, they can you control the theme of your component that you have built, so that they're more and more user and more generic implementation that you can think of. Then definitely reusability is definitely, that is unsaid thing which is required in any of the component that you are building, right? So this discuss about that, keep that in mind when you're like designing your component. Then obviously the data source is something that need to be discussed. When we say data source, who is actually taking in care of making the API call? Do you want to keep this logic inside the component, or you wanted to give this capability to the consumer so that more and more consumer can decide how they wanted to fetch the data, right? It's more about you are passing the relevant requirement which the user have input in the component, so that your business logic can be segregated and that can be abstracted from this component. So those kind of things that basically you should discuss in more detail, and you should come up with some APIs, component APIs, when you are designing that, right? So you can say it component, or you can also say it as a component API which is required. Sometimes an interviewer may be looking into like, let's write the code in order to like have the implementation of this. So we will be discussing about what are these interviews where the HLDs basically are asked, and some of the interviews where LLDs are basically low level designs are basically asked, and how to basically write those low level designs. We'll be discussing about more in detail. Now we have understood the different expectations, right? Expectations of a system design round in terms of requirement, functional, non-functional requirement, the scoping, tech choices, component architecture, right? The data API protocol and the implementation. Now we understand this. It's time to understand what are the high level design and the low level design which are generally asked in the interviews, right? So if the system design round is mostly evolving about the HLD, right, which is high level design, there is no point of discussing anything which is related to the low level design, because you can basically optimize the time duration which is provided in the interview in, so that you can focus more in detail of the high level. Similarly, when it is low level design, there is no point of talking about the high level, because that high level design may be having a different round altogether in the interviews, right? So it's important to understand what sort of like mindset of what sort of interview round that is, basically that is going to help you to dive better and meet the expectation of the interviewer in far better way, right? So with this we discuss about requirement scoping and the tech choices, right? All of these basically comes into your HLD, right? This is basically your high level design. So this is basically, you called it HLD. Maybe I can make it red color. Huh. This is basically HLD that mostly people call it. So in this HLD, basically what is being asked is like, are you able to discuss about the requirement? Can you come up about the functional, the non-functional requirement? Are you even think about prioritizing certain things? Are you even think about what should be the first MVP? What should be the key functionality that you should roll out? Obviously, people wanted to build everything, but you can't build everything in the one shot, right? So are you able to even prioritize what are the critical things and how you can roll out your P0, P1 and P2 sort of functionalities, right? Are you able to even think in terms of your users, their requirement? Are you able to think as a product manager, right? So those things are very important. Tech choices, are you even able to think in terms of the senior level architect, right? Where you can make the right set of tech choices. Those are basically main areas where people wanted to focus on the high level design. Similarly, when we talk about low level design, low level design is, it's like people have their expectation very clear. They wanted to dive you into the more granular, you can say, the implementation details instead of having the high level, because high, depending on your role, right? If you are not a senior guy, people may not ask you the high level design. People may want you to basically come up with the implementation detail and implement some piece of the application, right? So some of the question that you might see, like build a auto complete sort of thing, or build a chat application, or build a cart, right? Like any of the cart, product cart basically sort of thing, or build a product listing, or you can be asked to build a customizable form, right, where some configuration is given and you generate a form out of that. All sort of things basically are asked in this particular round, which is called LLD, which is low level design. and the expectation over here is sort of very clear. People don't want to dive into the internal details of that. It's more about they wanted to see how well you implement and how well you basically create the API, the component APIs, or basically how well you structure your protocols, or how your communication are going to be the backend and the front end, right? How well you are going to model your data, and how well you are basically going to have a component hierarchy, data sharing, those kind of things which are very important. Obviously the best practices that you are going to use in your application in order to build. So to make it very clear, high level is mostly asked for senior people, low level design are asked for almost everyone, either that is senior or the low level, like not low level, it's more about the people who are just starting a career or having couple of years of experience, right? So you should know how to develop your application, but high level designs are very critical for senior developer. Anyone like 4 5 year plus, most of the companies have started asking this high level. And very interesting, I have seen many startups, many companies which have started asking this high level design even for 2 year or 3 year experience. They are not expecting much detail, but they are expecting you to basically either you are able to think in those direction, or you have just done some assignments or tasks that are being like asked by the senior people. So sort of expectations are high these days in the front end. It's no longer to fetch the data and just show the data on the UI. मोटू भाई को कैसे भूल गए? मोटू भाई की तो टेक टीम बना रहे हैं, राइट? मोटू भाई इज स्टिल कंफ्यूज्ड कि ठीक है, आई अंडरस्टैंड प्रोडक्ट सेंस में ये सारी चीज़ें होती हैं. व्हाट अबाउट पीपल टॉकिंग अबाउट डिफरेंट टर्मिनोलॉजी लाइक सिस्टम डिज़ाइन, प्रोडक्ट सेंस, यूआई आर्किटेक्चर, मशीन कोडिंग राउंड, कंपोनेंट डिज़ाइन? भैया ये तो समझा दो. ओके, लेट्स डाइव इनटू. When we say system design, most of the time companies have a requirement, companies have expectation that you will be going into the requirement scoping, tech choices, component architecture, and the data API and the implementation. Whatever we have just discussed previously, almost everything you have to going to cover. And obviously you have to speak a lot in order to, like, in the short duration you have to showcase the knowledge that you are holding, right? So that is the expectation that companies are having. In the case of product sense round, like system designs are mostly asked in like Microsoft. In any of the big companies, people are looking for the system design rounds, right? So product sense, Flipkart do ask the product sense, and many startups have started asking the product sense, where the requirements and the expectation is like, whenever the system design is basically called about, it's more about the combination of multiple things. Are you able to think in terms of the business? Are you able to think from a product manager or the product side of thing, right? Are you able to think from the design perspective in terms of the user experience, user interfaces? Are you able to think as a front end developer in terms of not just the things which are visible to you, the back end side of the front end, right? In terms of the optimization, performance, non-functional requirement that we discussed, and obviously the back end. It's not about you are going to work on the back end. It's more about if you understand the backend guys well, what are the challenges they are facing, what are the ways they use in order to optimize, in order to basically implement certain pieces. So basically you will be able to help and chip in, and you will be able to discuss in more detail when you're having a contract discussion and when you're doing some solutioning. So that's why this, whenever the system designs are basically discussed about, it's a combination of everything that is listed over here, right? So similarly, when a product sense is basically considered, it's more about, are you able to think from a product side, right? Are you able to list down the requirement properly? Are you able to scope those things in terms of the prioritization, in terms of the like scoping, right? Are you able to come up with some basic, you can say, data APIs and the implementation that you wanted to have the back with the backend guy, right? So those kind of expectation are there in the like Flipkart, the other startup companies that they have started asking. UI architecture is again, people have expectation in terms of you will be diving into the requirement, may not be very depth in terms of the module, but yes, certain pieces, because the problem statement may not be very big or open enough, right? Similarly, scoping the items that you have just discussed in terms of the requirement, tech choices, people want you to dive into the very heavy tech choices discussion in the UI architecture, and obviously component architecture, in order to understand either you are able to think in terms of the reusability, right, sort of stuff. Obviously the data API and the implementation, so how you are going to basically fit and how your communication are going to have with the different backend teams, because there are so many teams that you will be having a discussion, microservices, multiple stuff, there are aggregator layers, how you are, what are the requirements that you may be having, maybe people team or have managing their GraphQL endpoints, right? So how well you are basically coming up with your requirements. It's not about कि ठीक है जो भी है database में दे दो मैं देख लूंगा जो चाहिए होगा, right? It's not going to work at a large scale. Obviously there's a lot of latency and unnecessary like network layer load. So those things need to be kept in mind. So talking about the machine coding and the component design, most of the companies generally ask this in terms of the low level design. They call it low level design, where either your machine coding or a component design will be first or the second round, where they will be giving you a small piece of application that need to be built, right? When we say small piece of application, as we discussed, it can be similar to building a customizable form or your card, right? It can be implementing a search capability, auto complete sort of thing, right? It may be simple functionality where you have to come with a pixel perfect some design. It can be a form, it can be a multiple screen router sort of thing that can be asked, right? So over here the expectation is obviously how well you are structuring your application, your code in order to implement. But on top of it, there are almost every company mentioning what is must have, right? Do take care of that must have. Don't try to basically do a super cool stuff in that small duration, because that round may vary from 1 hour to 2 hour. Sometimes it's 3 hours. Sometimes people give you as an work at home sort of stuff as well, right? They will give you a big problem, big application that need to be built, and they want to be you return back in 24 hours, 48 hours sort of things are there, right? Over here the expectations are not never that everything you will remember in terms of the function, the code, everything. It's more about, it's okay if you forget some method, you can google it out, that works, right? It's more about how well you basically implement, are you using the best practices in order to get into those, right? So in this, the just make sure what is the expectation, what is the must have you have to basically consider while implementing. Just take care of that. Certain tools can basically help you to speed up the flow diagram, or the speed up the things that you wanted to have in your system design, right? The way you wanted to present. Couple of them which are very famous. So there are ways, like you can open any of the like paint, also you can use your pen and basically you can draw. If you are that is a physical basically system design, you can use whiteboard definitely in order to draw and basically represent what you wanted to have. For the high level design, for low level design, obviously you need a system in order to code most of the time, right? But yes, in terms of high level, if you are, it is an online interview. These tools are basically going to help you to boost up your experience a lot. Just give a try before actually going to the system designs round, so that you know what tool, what from where, what you need to be picked. Most of the time people are open to use any of these tools, but if they are not, let's try this out, because most of the companies that I've seen using these tools, one of these tools in order to basically ask your system design. One is draw.io. Just look at it out, and it is very cool and very easy to use. Gliffy.com is another. The lucidchart.com is basically another very good example. Miro.com is another tool which is going to help. OneNote from the Microsoft is also a very good tool, where you can use your joystick in order to basically draw certain things, or use your mouse basically in order to draw or do a freehand drawing also. Zamboard, most of the time in Google UI, or you can say Uber, or many companies I've seen people asking you to use the Jamboard basically, where you have multiple slides, you use one slide for the requirement, other slide for different purposes. So these are very cool tool. Just get your hand dirty, so that before actually getting into the system design round, you know how to be more productive, right? It's more about productive. You should be talking, you should be discussing more in detail, instead of searching ये कनेक्ट कैसे करूँ, इसको रिप्रेजेंट बॉक्स से करूँ या सर्कल से करूँ, राइट? सो गेट रेड ऑफ दोज थिंग बेसिकली, दैट विल मेक you more productive in while basically attending the interviews. So yeah, let's talk about most important part, which is mantra to crack the system designs round, right? Which is छोटी पर मोटी बातें, जो कि मोटू भाई को भी बहुत पसंद आती हैं. First thing is, don't be like Puspa. As we said, वही बताएगा जो आता है, right? वही बताएगा जो पढ़ के आया है. It's not going to work, right? So what you should do, you should always check the expectation from your interviewer, right? So keep on checking the requirements and the expectation, which is very important. The next point is basically you keep on talking in the system interview round, which is very important. Most of the people don't understand. So keep talking, that will help the interviewer to gauge lot of information about you in a very short duration, because most of the time they wanted to understand what sort of work you have done, what sort of thought process you have, what decision you will be taking in different use cases, requirements, right? Which is very important. Don't rush into the implementation, which is very 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 important, right? Most of the people directly shoot into the implementation and they think कि this is very important and like as we are a developer तो भैया implement करके दिखा देंगे तो it's going to work. In system design this is not going to work. Most important, right? Pick one problem at a time. When you are going to discuss anything in detail, don't jump into too many things like at a time. This is not going to help you, right? So pick one, get into the detail, keep on asking with your interviewer what is the expectation, and basically couple of things in terms of get familiar with the tool also, that is going to basically make you more productive during the interviews, and where you won't be searching for what sort of tool, how to use that tool. Your thought process will be more about cracking the system design, discussing about your knowledge, right? The expectation that is there. So the thing is like definitely go and practice 2 3 system design, how to basically create those HLD and LLD with the different tools, and yes, that is going to help. We are also going to cover a lot of mock interviews, mock example, you can say the sample problems that we'll be discussing in the upcoming videos of Chakde design system series. So keep watching that. Along with that, the most important thing, in the last thing which you should keep in mind is related to keep on discussing, keep on thinking, take a approach and basically discuss that approach, finalize that approach, and basically repeat. Keep on iterating so that you come to the better version of the expectation which is there, right? I hope you got a better understanding of how to crack a front-end system design interviews, right? If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that it can reach to the most of the people who are looking in order to how to crack the front-end system design system, right? Also, do let me know in the comment what sort of mock interviews, what sort of HLD and LLD interviews question that you wanted to cover me in the upcoming episode. Thank you for watching Chakde System Design series, and see you in the next episode.